Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Sapan Ghai, CCO of Sovereign Metals. Welcome back, Sapan.
Good to be here, Phil.
So today we saw the news announced that the Kasiya Indicated Resource has increased by over 80%. The Kasiya Indicated Resource now stands at 1.2 billion tonnes at 1% rutile and 1.5% graphite. The updated mineral resource estimate moves over 500 million tonnes from inferred to indicated, an increase of 81% to the indicated category, with over 66% of the total mineral resource estimate now in the indicated category. Kasiya's global mineral resource estimate is now over 1.8 billion tonnes at 1% rutile and 1.4% graphite. Kasiya remains the world's largest natural rutile deposit and second largest flake graphite deposit. The updated mineral resource estimate will underpin the mining inventory and mine plans for the forthcoming pre-feasibility study. Sounds like great news, Sapan.
Yeah, it totally is, Bill. Look, we have been working on proving up the resource from inferred to indicated. As you know, we're working towards a PFS towards the middle of this year. Pre-feasibility studies can only take measured and indicated resources into account. We had done a scoping study previously that looked at the inferred part of the resource. But now with, 1.2 billion tons of indicated resource in there, that gives us ample resource to feed into our pre-feasibility study model.
So based on these figures, does this make the pre-feasibility study even more likely to be financially beneficial to the company?
TBD, we've still got to work through our costs and what the pricing mechanics are for the commodities going forward. So I don't want to preempt what may drop out of a pre-feasibility study here. The fact that, look, previously we had based a study on having 6.9 million tons of rutile in indicated, and now we've got 12.2, so that's like almost double. And you're talking about 18 million tons of graphite in the indicated category versus 9.5 million tons just last year. So we've got a lot more resource in the right category for us to play with, for us to figure out what's the most economically viable way of mining this deposit. Our announcement had some information around how we've been able to basically define this indicated resource, but it really is from a lot of infill drilling between different patches of indicated resource, found that actually the mineralization was contiguous between those patches. So we're very happy to know that. And secondly, I think, we've touched on this before, but we did some deeper drilling. And when I talk about deeper, it's not like gold or copper mining type of deep drilling. We're talking about just going down to an average of about 22 meters below ground, which is where we stop having that nice grainy, soily saprolite, which the rutile and graphite is based in, and we hit actual hard rock. We don't want to mine hard rock, right? There's just too many complexities, too many CO2 emissions go into hard rock mining. But if we're just looking at that top layer of saprolite, we saw huge grades of graphite and rutile, and that mineralization just continued all the way down to the 22 meters mark, whereas previously we had only gone down to about 14 meters.
22 meters is a great depth for a good swimming pool, and once you've gone down to the hard rock.
Well, we are hydro mining it, so maybe we can leave a bit of water around.
Yeah, you can leave some water there, and everybody can have a tourist attraction then with what's left. Okay, so the rutile has always been the star, if you like. Maybe because this is the world's biggest rutile deposit. So, it's fairly reasonable that we look at the rutile. But because of the way that the world is going in terms of these battery metals and battery requirements, the graphite actually could play a major role in this and not just be a side issue. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, the graphite was about 35% of our total revenues in our last study, so it's not exactly immaterial to the project. The fact that we found the high-grade graphite, more of it, almost double the amount of it into the indicated category of resource as well. We've got to start scratching our heads as to whether, this is a rutile deposit with a graphite co-product or whether it's a rutile graphite deposit in itself, which is an interesting kind of Hollywood problem to have given the dynamics of the overall graphite market, which you've alluded to. What's interesting is, funnily enough, about a week ago or so, I saw a social media post which had Solver Metals along with other graphite producers and developers showing, grades of each of the companies, and we were towards the bottom because we're only 1.5%, whereas you have a 1.5% graphite whereas you have companies out there with double figure kind of grades, percentage grades. But what is the grade? The grade is an indicator of how cost-effective a project could ultimately be. We've already shown in the scoping study that we'd be the lowest cost graphite producer around because the graphite is simply a co-product of the rutile. We'd be doing the mining and a lot of the processing just to get the rutile out. So we may as well finish the job on whatever we're left with to get a bunch of graphite out. And what that would cost us, based on our previous study, was about $140 a ton for a ton of graphite concentrate that in, today's market would sell for about $1,500 a ton. So a very, very healthy margin there. So yes, Kasiya is not a high grade graphite project, but it is by far one of the lowest cost, if not the lowest cost project out there. And it's also the second largest flake graphite deposit. So it's going to be key to future role in the supply chain for graphite into battery metals. And, a few weeks ago, we announced that also producing graphite from Kasiya would have the lowest CO2 emissions around. So you've got a project which is, one of the largest, one of the lowest cost and the lowest CO2 emissions when it comes to graphite. So if you're a believer in the graphite macro and the graphite investment case, then you could do a lot worse than look at Kasiya.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that when you first went to Kasiya, it was for graphite. Hence the reason why you rolled out all the other projects into another company.
Yeah.
And now you're focusing on Kasiya. So the question is, would Kasiya stack up just as graphite without the rutile? There's probably a good chance it would.
Yeah, it probably would if you wanted to just mine it as a graphite deposit. But again, you end up with the same situation as we have, but in reverse, where you've taken out the light fraction, which is the graphite, and you were left with this heavy mineral tailings, the leftovers of your processing, which contains a whole bunch of rutile in there, which sells for, up to $2,500 a ton right now. So why wouldn't you spend a bit of money getting that on a ship somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I mean, the scenario is that it won't take a lot for prices of graphite to go up for this to be really a 50-50 project in terms of graphite and rutile.
Yeah, you're right. If the rutile market, sustains itself where it is, and to be honest, all indications are that, if anything, the rutile price itself should be heading north as well. There's a lot more discussion around the supply of titanium, both as a metal and in the pigment markets. Producing titanium, a lot of waste. And if you're using an ingredient in your mix that's already 95% of the way there, versus what most people are doing right now, which is using something that's 40 to 60% there in the form of ilmenite, I mean, you're creating a lot less waste. I think using rutile over ilmenite creates about 1/7 of the waste materials that ilmenite would. So there's a definite kind of cost saving there to our future customers to come and look at our rutile rather than continue to buy from ilmenite supply.
Yeah, and we've discussed about coming down to Malawi anyway, just to see what's on the ground. So hopefully that's going to happen in the near future. You were talking about May there to actually go and see it. And I think that will put some perspective around this whole situation, both from a size point of view and the thing. But there is absolutely no doubt that if you are ESG bothered, that this project is truly amazing. Like, it's lowest cost, lowest impact on the environment. You're going to help many people in Malawi. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create something really good for the Malawi economy. So ESG-wise, this is an amazing project. And financially, it also looks like it stacks up. And if all of these prices continue to go north, it's going to be quite an amazing cash generation project.
Just quickly on the ESG side, you use the term ESG bothered, which, there's always a lot of discussion around how much of the ESG initiatives that corporates are undertaking today are virtue signaling and how much of it is actual, truly beneficial, both from a social perspective, but also from a financial perspective, right? And what I'll say to that is the reason we've done a lot of work around being able to say we would be the lowest CO2 producer of graphite and rutile is simply that, you have pigment producers who use rutile and they use ilmenite, and it's quite an energy intensive process to produce pigment from rutile. It's also a very energy intensive process to produce battery anodes from graphite, right? Now, with energy prices going up, the less energy you require to get to your end product, the better for those producers further downstream. But also, you have initiatives at the governmental level now, such as, the EU carbon tax initiative that says, for every ton of CO2 that you're putting up the chimney stack, you may end up having to pay 100 euros in taxes. Well, all of a sudden, if you're only putting 0.2 tons of CO2 up versus 20 tons, that's quite a considerable saving over time, right? So on the ESG side, there is can you be ESG bothered, but there is definitely a financial impact to it that we're seeing on that front. Now, financially, the enhanced scoping study speaks for itself, right? We had a capex of 370 million tons to initial production. That would get a 25-year mine up and running to produce about 150,000 tons of rutile, 120,000 tons of graphite over those 25 years, with an NPV, so a net present value today of $1.5 billion. So, if you're looking at a project and you've got to spend $370 million to get $1.5 billion back, now you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, it sounds compelling.
I mean, we haven't really touched, as you say, we've mentioned the graphite, but when you look at the latest news on graphite, the demand for graphite is booming, isn't it? And it's really not showing any signs of slowing down. The irony is that I was reading a few articles about, obviously, the requirement from EV to energy storage, furnaces, and it's even ironic that the furnaces that are used to produce this high-quality, pure graphite require components made from, you guessed it, from graphite as well. So that's quite ironic. But the other thing about it is, and this is probably the last question, is a lot of people don't realize that it's a bit of an unsung hero of the EV battery, isn't it, graphite, in the fact that by weight, there's 7 to 10 times more graphite than lithium in one of those lithium-ion batteries, making it the largest component itself. Little surprise then that obviously global demand for graphite is expected to grow 7-fold between now and 2035. Just what do you think these companies are doing, or these manufacturers are doing now, planning for this demand, Sapan?
Oh, look, we know firsthand that your battery, your gigafactories, your battery makers, your car manufacturers, they all understand the importance of graphite in the mix. You said 7 to 8 times the amount of, some of the other components. It could be up to 50-60% of the volume of a lithium-ion battery is actually graphite. And I think I've said a couple of times before, you've got people like Elon Musk who are saying, I don't know why you're calling our batteries lithium-ion batteries. They should be called nickel graphite batteries, because those are the main components. They've kind of given you a clue as to what the real, the supply deficit, or the real kind of powerful supply chains into the EV sector are really going to come from.
Absolutely. On that note, we'll say thanks very much, Sapan Ghai, Chief Commercial Officer of Sovereign Metals. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, gents.
Thanks, Sapan.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net